We can go ahead now. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Arab Organization for Human Rights in the UK, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We are pleased to welcome those of you who have been able to attend and contribute to this urgent webinar titled 20 Months of Genocide, the Role of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and the Disappearance of the Madleen boat activists. This webinar is organized today to shed light on the escalating humanitarian crimes committed under the cover of aid and reconstruction of Gaza, particularly those carried out by the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It's an entity accused of corruption, exploitation, and complicity in the ongoing genocide in the Gaza Strip. And this webinar will also address the recent and deeply alarming abduction of all passengers aboard the humanitarian aid boat Madleen, which was sailing towards Gaza. And Israeli forces intercepted this boat, Madleen, in international waters and forcibly disappeared all activists on board. To date, their whereabouts remain completely unknown, raising serious concerns for their safety and well-being. The seminar will host a distinguished panel of politicians. We don't want to take time and let's hit the road directly. And just let me tell you the format of today's. Each speaker will have 5 to 7 minutes to present his testimony and insights. And after all speakers have finished their presentation, if time permits, we will have a discussion session lasting no more than 20 minutes. During this session, speakers can add their thoughts and comments on their speakers' contributions. At the end of the webinar, each speaker will have something like 1 minute to provide the final words and conclusion. And let's start right away with our first guest, Mr. Pedro Arrojo-Agudo, UN Special Rapporteur on the human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation. Mr. Pedro, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What I can do as a UN Special Rapporteur on the human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation is briefly present to you the inhumane situation of the population of Gaza with regard to drinking water, sanitation, and the consequences for the health of more than 2 million people. Israel, through government and army spokesmen at the highest level, publicly proclaimed from the beginning of this war that it would cut off water, food, and energy to the civilian population. Currently, the population lives at present on an average of 5 liters per person and per day. Any one of us uses no less than 100 liters for our daily needs without any luxury. And the WHO sets the minimum requirement in emergency situations at 15 liters. But the most serious thing is that accessible water is often contaminated by fecal matter and salinized, leading to serious health problems, especially for children and infants. The only one natural source of fresh water in the coast is the coastal aquifer in Gaza, shared with Israel. The Strip is home to 2.3 million Palestinians, of whom 1.7 million are refugees forced by Israel to live there in refugee camps. During the blockade that Gaza has been suffering for more than 17 years, this huge population has been forced to pump 3 times more water than the aquifer received through natural replenishment, resulting in intense marine intrusion and salinization. In addition, Israel has been blocking during all this time 70% of the materials needed to build and operate sewage treatment plants, considered as dual-use materials, preventing proper sewage treatment, which has led to progressive fecal contamination of groundwater. Until the outbreak of the war, drinking water was supplied by desalination plants and a limited amount of water sold to the Palestinians by Israel. This provided drinking water to about 40% of the population. At the outbreak of the war, Israel radically cut off this water supply and cut off the power supply, collapsing desalination plants and the few treatment plants that were in force working. The lack of clean water has led to 1.7 million cases of infectious diseases, mainly diarrhea, dysentery, and hepatitis A, particularly affecting children, as well as cases of polio, smallpox, and other infectious diseases that can trigger massive and deadly epidemics. All this, coupled with the lack of medical care, result in deaths, especially babies and children, making water scarcity and contamination, as I say, usually silent bomb. A silent, yes, but lethal bomb. Israel's violation of existing international law, as International Criminal Court has already ruled, is systematic. Both the Fourth Geneva Convention and the Rome Statute, as well as customary international humanitarian law, are being violated on a daily basis. As I have long insisted, the Rome Statute classifies the cutting off medicines and food, and let us not forget that water is the essential daily food we need, as a crime of extermination. But not compliance with international law related to water does not only concern Gaza. The militarization of water in the occupied Palestinian territories has been at the heart of a policy of water and territorial apartheid for the past 50 years. 50 years already, including the destruction of basic Palestinian water infrastructure. Palestinians have no access to the Jordan River and cannot build wells or water infrastructure in their own territories. They have only 70 liters per person per day, and many rural communities have only 20 liters, while Israeli population has 4 times more on average, and illegal settlers receive around 20 times more water for their crop and swimming pools. Well, in summary, we are witnessing genocide against the Palestinian people. And I insist, we cannot remain impassive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pedro, for your thoughts. And now we move to Mr. Richard Falk, Professor of International Law. And Mr. Richard, are you there? Hello, Mr. Richard. Mr. Richard, can you just open the camera, Mr. Richard Falk? Hello, Mr. Richard. So it seems that Mr. Richard is not ready for his word. And so we move to Dr. Michael Fakhri, UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food. Mr. Fakhri, you have the floor.
Thank you, Nader. I'll just build on what my colleague Pedro, the Special Rapporteur on Water, has sort of outlined, provide a bit also some context of the current starvation campaign by Israel, and then touch upon this so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. So looking back, Israel has imposed a blockade against Gaza since 2000. This is something to remember. This is a 25-year blockade. So if we look at October 6th, 2023, half of everybody in Gaza was food insecure, and 80% of people in Gaza relied on humanitarian aid. They were dependent on humanitarian aid. Then on October 9th, Israel declared its starvation campaign in response to Hamas's taking of hostages. So since October 9th, Israel has been imposing explicitly a starvation campaign. For the first couple of weeks, it blocked all food from entering all of Gaza, and it's always focused on the north. So Israel's plan of displacing Palestinians from northern Gaza and concentrating everyone into the south was clear from the beginning, from 20 months ago. So for over 20 months, myself, my colleague Pedro, several of the special rapporteurs and independent experts with the UN human rights system have been following what's been happening in Gaza, but also in the Palestinian territories more broadly. And what we're seeing, what we're running out of descriptors. We've called it a genocide. As Pedro has noticed, it's extermination, which is a crime against humanity. There are current arrest warrants now for Prime Minister Netanyahu and former Minister of Defense Gallant for the war crime of starvation. This is the first time an international criminal warrant has been issued for the crime of starvation. And I'll turn now to the last 85 days or so. So on March 2nd, Israel, excuse me, on March 1st, Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that Israel would stop all goods and humanitarian aid from entering Gaza. And that's in effect what has happened for over 80 days now. Meanwhile, in April, Israel also announced its plans of what later becomes the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Immediately, every UN humanitarian organization and the UN Secretary General himself criticizes the Israeli plan, that this plan is not a humanitarian plan. From the beginning, Israel's aid plan was a clear tactic to use aid for military purposes. And what is that military purpose? Well, Israel tells us. Israel told us several times, but yet again, Israel announced its plan to indefinitely occupy Gaza, basically annexation. We know that this is a broad plan by Israel to annex the remaining Palestinian territories, and they're using starvation as one of their main tools and weapons as a mechanism for full annexation. So UNICEF called this plan by Israel and that's operated by the United States. They said what they're doing, the Americans and the Israeli forces are using aid as bait to bait civilians to these militarized distribution sites that are run by US mercenaries that are supported by Israeli armed forces. So this is militarized, politicized aid being used as a trap to trap people who are desperate for anything. This was predicted by UNICEF, by the Secretary General, by so many UN agencies. And unfortunately, this is what's happened. So we see now that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sites are militarized traps where we keep receiving reports of Israeli forces opening fire against civilians. And again, this is a plan to depopulate, to ethnically cleanse northern Gaza, concentrate everyone in the south, and further humiliate the Palestinian people in Gaza. This is also an attempt to sideline the United Nations, because the United Nations, through UNRWA, through the WHO, through UNICEF, through the World Food Program, is ready. The convoys are at the border, the warehouses are available. More importantly, the networks are available. When the UN enters, they have established networks and they can get aid to people and stop starvation immediately. So this is an explicit attempt to sideline the United Nations, to use aid in a politicized, militarized manner to humiliate and punish the Palestinian people in this effort to fully annex Gaza. Of course, we're seeing record degree of violence in the West Bank and East Jerusalem as well, right, to get a big picture. And just in my remaining minute, I want to talk about the Gaza Freedom Flotilla and the Madleen. I mean, this was an effort by civilians to do what governments are failing to do, which is implement international law and end this genocide and end this starvation. So what we saw is one ship, because they had attempted a month ago to come to break the illegal blockade by Israel. but drones had bombed their ship off the coast of Malta. So this time they sent another ship, one ship with 12 people from multiple countries. The ship bore the flag of the United Kingdom. They're carrying humanitarian aid. They let anyone inspect their ship. This was very clear. And they set sail. Predictably, Israel intercepted the ship in international waters and kidnapped and detained everybody. This is illegal. Their blockade is illegal. The territorial waters is Palestinian territory. Israel has no right to block any humanitarian aid anywhere, but especially in Palestinian water. So the ship, the Madleen, the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, is an example of citizens, of individuals, of civilians enforcing international law themselves, and we're seeing multiple initiatives by civilians. We see the march from Tunisia, the Sumud March. We see the March on Gaza from Cairo, and from what I understand, they're starting to work together. We see more and more civilians doing what governments are failing to do. What governments need to do? First and foremost, they need to support these civilian convoys. Second, but they need to be more active. They need to pass a resolution at the General Assembly because the Security Council failed yet again, predictably. The United States vetoed the latest attempt for a call for ceasefire. In light of this blockage at the Security Council, the General Assembly has the authority under the UN Charter to call for UN peacekeepers to accompany humanitarian convoys. Why else do we have peacekeepers if not to end genocide and end starvation? Thank you very much. Back to you, Nader.
Thank you very much, Michael. And now, since Mr. Richard Falk is there, Mr. Richard, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
I did.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we can hear you. We can hear you. So, Mr. Richard, now you have the floor.
Good. I want to follow on what has been very clearly expressed by my two prior colleagues and speakers. It is extremely defiant of Israel to do what it's doing in light of not only the repeated actions within the UN that have been from early on blocked in their enforcement principally by the US, but also with the support of the liberal democracies of Europe. It is a shameful episode in international normative behavior that the countries that pride themselves on championing human rights and an enlightened view of the role of international law should have so dramatically undermined the implementation of the most basic principles of international law ever since the occupation of Palestine and the 1967 occupation of the Palestinian territories of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. It illustrates an enforcement gap in the application of international law that really undermines the capacity of the UN to fulfill the promise of the UN Charter. And it does, as Michael Fakhri suggested, leave it to the mobilized activism of people to exert pressure on governments and to take solidarity initiatives of a variety of kinds. And there's now talk of a general strike, of exerting various forms of pressure to establish arms embargoes on Israel, to suspend Israel's participation in the UN. There is the initiative that I'm associated with to proceed with a Gaza tribunal that basically endorses this notion that where international law is blocked in its enforcement by geopolitical interference, civil society has a responsibility and opportunity to provide the necessary solidarity activism that will alter the balance of forces. This happened during the Vietnam War with the anti-war movement. It happened to a great extent in the anti-apartheid campaign against South Africa. This is, as has been said, increasingly recently, the moral challenge of our time. And it is confronting the peoples of the world with a challenge to the political imagination. How does a clear consensus of popular views get translated into effective political action in the light of obstructive tactics ruthlessly pursued by geopolitical forces, especially the US. And one final point, that we see the hypocrisy underlying this posture toward Israel on the one hand, and Russia in the Ukraine context in the other hand. It has reduced international law to being a policy instrument against adversaries rather than a regulative means of controlling the behavior of states, which is certainly the intention. Law is not law if it isn't applied equally to the strong and to the weak. And so one hopes that the rising tide of solidarity with the Palestinian struggle can be turned into an effective movement that puts sufficient pressure on governments around the world, and particularly in Europe and North America, to bring this genocide to an end and to work toward the liberation of the Palestinian people. Let me stop there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richard. That was really insightful look at the international law. And now we move to Ms. Clara Knaper Bohman, Associate Researcher, Department of Political Science. Clara, have the floor.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you for inviting me to this very, very important meeting. So I'm a political scientist that have concentrated my research on the West Bank. First strategy that the EU had, it is the diplomatic freeze of Gaza 2007. And I just want to start briefly by saying that I believe that this complete diplomatic freeze has obviously failed in promoting any kind of Palestinian state building, democratization, and has not led to anything fruitful. So that's my first statement. But regarding the Freedom Flotilla and Greta Thunberg, since I'm also speaking as a Swedish person, I believe that Greta Thunberg and the activists are of immense importance in today's society, where there is an ongoing attack from Israel and from other countries in the world on civil society. We see it throughout Europe that especially Palestinian activists are silenced as a process of silencing dissidents and opposition. So all crew members on the ship are very important, and we don't know what has happened to all of them. Some of them have landed in France. Greta Thunberg is on the way to Sweden right now. But this needs also to be seen in a bigger light of an attack on civil society and the shrinking civic space in the world. And I believe that the more the world goes right-wing, the less of a role international law, human rights, and also international organizations play. And this is where I want to share some insights from the Swedish Red Cross. The Israeli government has said that the argument why they don't let the UN in is because of Antonio Guterres being anti-Semitic. But in my opinion, I think that it's very important for all states now to work for strengthening the UN and strengthening international organizations that actually have an idea and a plan for how the humanitarian aid can be distributed. Because what we are seeing now is total chaos and breaches against any kind of international law, actually. The shooting of civilians, our colleague said it before, the shooting of civilians and also the militarization of aid and pushing the Gazan civilians from one point to another where they are shot at. This is not according to any international law, the Geneva Convention, you name it. I could speak hours about international law, but my point is that 70% of the people killed and the Palestinians killed are women and children. And according to international law, civilians are not to be killed by any of the parts. And this needs to end immediately. So these kind of private actors that are taking care of the aid, that I believe is not a fruitful solution at all. And we need to let in the Israeli government needs to let in the Red Cross or the UN. And we need to start seeing it in the light of a bigger crisis where human rights and international organizations and civil society are suffering a lot. So I think what states should do is stop silencing dissent, strengthen civil society organizations, and especially also stand up for the humanitarian aid that is needed in Gaza so much, because these pictures of burning children, we have seen them before in Vietnam, and the situation where starvation is used as a method of war is devastating, and it needs to have an end. And to just finalize my statement, if we look at these 20 months now since the 7th of October, the dehumanization started in the form of a rhetoric about drawing a parallel between Palestinian citizens and animals. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir talked about not letting a single piece of wheat into Gaza. And this dehumanization has just increased to a point, and we have seen this before in history in other contexts of genocide, that is unbearable now. And I think civil society really needs to step up. And I think that the flotilla did a really good job in that. And the breaches against international law were already pointed out by my colleague. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara, very much. And now we move to Dr. Lex Takkenberg, Senior Advisor of the ARDD. Dr. Lex, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much for the
You're welcome.
opportunity I always appreciate a chance to participate in and address your important webinars. I have heard with great interest and agree with the interventions of the previous speakers. So let me sort of make a couple of additional points on the. Michael Fakhri explained sort of the rationale, the Israeli rationale behind this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation as a sort of a bait to help Israel with its ongoing strategy of forced displacement, and in particular moving the Palestinians from the north of Gaza to the south, possibly as a prelude to further displacement into Egypt or beyond. What I also think is that we should see the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation as a component of Israel's sort of use of starvation as a weapon of war and as a political instrument. It was becoming clear by the time Trump went to the Gulf now a couple of weeks ago that the images of sort of starving children were sort of reaching the White House and were sort of beginning to annoy Trump to a point that he sort of said, this starvation must stop. So and I believe that the introduction of this humanitarian foundation is not indeed a normal humanitarian operation, but sort of a cynical and carefully orchestrated attempt to provide a pretext to the Trump administration to continue its support for the ongoing war. So it serves as a kind of band-aid, as a pacifier in a way to Trump to prevent him from really forcing Israel's hand and imposing a ceasefire, as Trump was close to, and as in the sort of the leaders in the Gulf countries that he spoke to sort of implored him to do. So the very system of this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is flawed, and it was tried a year ago. We will remember the US constructed pier that only operated for a couple of weeks. And a predecessor of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a company called Falk, also with an association, pseudo-humanitarian association in Switzerland. That did not work, and I'm convinced, as someone who has worked for half my lifetime with UNRWA and as a humanitarian, that this will sooner rather than later fail. The way I see it is it buys Netanyahu a couple of weeks, perhaps a couple of months of time before he is eventually pressured into accepting a ceasefire. In the meantime, Israel has been attempting, and has to a considerable extent succeeded in sort of dismantling the existing UN-led aid system and try to replace it with this new architecture. We have seen the devastating attack on humanitarian workers, more than 300 killed, including over 200 of my former colleagues at UNRWA, accusing UNRWA and the wider UN to enable Hamas to hold on to power. We're now seeing a situation that humanitarian agencies are still present, but are prevented from sort of, with the exception of a trickle of aid that reaches them, essentially unable to do their job. UNRWA has, received the brunt of the attacks on the humanitarian system. I already mentioned more than 220 UNRWA personnel killed, over 300 of its schools and clinics and other installations damaged. The agency accused, without any evidence by Israel, of some of its staff having been involved in the attacks of 7 October. And the agency, as a result, and then we have seen the culmination of these attacks on UNRWA with the passing by the Israeli Knesset, Israel's parliament, of 2 laws with the aim to sort of further undermine the agency, ban the agency in East Jerusalem, and severely hamper its work in Gaza and the rest of the West Bank. We're facing a very difficult crisis with respect to UNRWA. Let me sort of draw attention to that. The Israeli attacks on UNRWA come on top of an already longer-lasting sort of gap between the needs of the Palestinian refugees that UNRWA is responsible for to provide for, and the financial contributions that are made available. So we are seeing that UNRWA is reaching another sort of financial crisis point where it may be unable to pay salaries, or it's likely that it will be unable to pay salaries from as early as next month onward, which further aggravates the situation in Gaza, but also UNRWA services in the West Bank, and also in Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon, where UNRWA operates. So I just wanted to we have become sort of accustomed to the attacks on UNRWA in the broader context of the attacks on the Palestinians in Gaza. I just want to sort of recall that the crisis in UNRWA is far from over, and along with the other calls on ending the genocide, on a ceasefire, and on the resumption of humanitarian leave, opening the borders, we should also add a further renewed and urgent call on governments to continue to support UNRWA and to make an extra effort to prevent UNRWA from collapsing at the time that the Palestinian refugee population and the Palestinian population at large are at their darkest times. So let me end with that.
Thank you very much, Lex. And now we will move to a different perspective of some of the families of the people who were on board Madleen. And now we have some relatives. And we start with Katja van Ren, sister of Dutch citizen Marco van Ren, passenger aboard the ship Madleen. Katja, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Yeah, if you can just let us know what's going on with your brother now.
We have been able to have some contact with him yesterday evening through the phone. And our latest update that we got just now is that they are transferred to the prison and the lawyers are meeting them. So far, we are not entirely sure what will happen after that. But what is really interesting to me is that here in the Netherlands, first of all, still there is no public statement or anything from our government, from our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which I am quite surprised by, actually, because simply the fact that this was international waters, and you would think that even with all the geopolitical things going on, they would stand for their citizens. But right now they are just incredibly scared to do so. And also any negative comments that we did have about Mark and about the Madleen have mostly been people trying to link helping the people of Gaza to helping Hamas, which I did not expect, and it's interesting to see how people are still not exactly aware of what is going on. But the thing is, what is going on, everybody can see that it is not okay, it is not acceptable. But because it is still linked in people's mind to terrorism for some reason, I find that people around me find it very difficult to speak out, even if they do agree. And I think I will end it there.
And do you know, for the time being, do you know exactly what's happening with your brother now?
Yeah, not entirely, because we don't have any contact with him right now. All we know is that they are in that prison, and I think that some of the other families will also have the same information as me and are probably way better at explaining this. Some of the volunteers have already gone home. They are gone home, sent home. They signed a paper saying that they are willingly being deported, and some of the volunteers decided not to do that. And this is also something we have been explained that is a strategic decision from the organization itself for the high profile people.
Sorry for interruption, but do you mean that the people who were freed, who were sent home, are the people who have signed this paper, and the people who rejected to sign who was still in prison?
As far as I am aware, yes.
Yeah, okay. Is that it, Katya? Thank you very much, Katya, and hope you have good news about your brother very soon. And now we move to another relative of the people on board, Lara Souza, human rights activist and wife of activist Tiago, a representative of the Freedom Flotilla Coalition High Committee and passenger aboard the ship Madleen. And Lara, can you just update us with the latest about your husband?
Yes, good afternoon. Well, as Katja said, we had no communication with them after the interception. I still wasn't able to talk to Thiago. Yesterday, when he got to the airport, the embassy, the Brazilian embassy, was there, and they didn't allow the embassy to call me. He couldn't call. He was being interviewed, and after that, the lawyer called me, but they didn't allow her to give him the phone, so I couldn't talk to Thiago. The last time I talked to him was before the interception, was Sunday afternoon. And after that, I have no communication, I have no news from him. Yesterday, the Brazilian embassy was trying to communicate, was trying to talk to him, and they wasn't allowed either. And when it was middle of the night for most of you, it was beginning of night here in Brazil, and we could talk to him. The embassy could talk to him, but as I said, I couldn't. And he was one of the people that decided not to sign the papers. As Katja said, 4 volunteers, 4 participants signed it. It was a decision for them to speak out, so the 4 volunteers could do interviews and tell what happened, and go to media and give information. The other 8 remain in prison. They are in a facility, in a prison facility, and we have no updates, actually. The hearing was today. Tiago was the first one. His lawyer called me right after, just saying he was okay. She said she didn't have time to talk much because she couldn't take her phone into the court, and she had all the other audience, the other judgments to go. And now she just called me, but I'm here. She just texted me saying that they don't have yet the decision of when Tiago is coming home. She says he's being deported, but she can't tell me when. The judgment didn't give any date for that. And now we are just expecting when they are bringing them home. And well, as was said before, the Freedom Flotilla, the Madleen was a civil society initiative, and they were in international waters. They were very close to Gaza, that is Palestinian waters, but they were still in international waters, and by any point of view, this is illegal. So they were intercepted, they were attacked last month, they were bombed, and they were bombed in European waters. Now they were intercepted in international waters, and they had all the authorizations. They had the UK flights, they had all the bureaucracy to sail, they were allowed to sail, and they were intercepted. So that is a crime. And they were just trying to take humanitarian aid. They were trying to open a humanitarian aid. So a humanitarian warrior, sorry. So this is not a crime. They were just trying to help. They were trying to do what the governments should do. So everything, all that we want now is that the governments, the people, just pressure the governments to bring them home and say that it is illegal to arrest people that didn't commit any crime. I'm sorry, I'm nervous because I just got the news, but that's all that we know right now.
That's it. Thank you very much. We understand, of course, your feelings. And now for the whole webinar, now just raising an issue, a question of the UK, along with Canada and New Zealand and Australia, has imposed sanctions on two far-right Israeli ministers, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, over their insightful and dehumanizing comments about the genocide in Gaza. This move follows two formal sanctions requests submitted by AOHR UK to the British Foreign Secretary, the first in late 2023 and the second just yesterday. These efforts have now resulted in direct measures against individuals responsible for fueling mass atrocities. My question now, what is your comment to this long overdue decision by the UK, and what should be the next step after these sanctions? So who wants to answer the question? Can go ahead. Mr. Fakhri, go ahead.
Thank you, Nader. Maybe I'll start. We've been, as independent human rights experts in the UN system, we've been calling for sanctions for 20 months. Now, you pointed out some of the sanctions that have been happening, which have been what they call sort of targeted sanctions against particular individuals. But I think it's important to understand what kind of sanctions are necessary to end the starvation and genocide. First, let's go to the International Court of Justice when it found that the Israeli occupation is illegal. What's important is not that it found it illegal. That was an obvious decision. But what the International Court of Justice did is it called for the immediate withdrawal of Israel from all Palestinian territory and authorized countries to impose sanctions against Israel until it withdrew its occupation. This is the legal context in which we're in. So what that means is that sanctions are necessary against the entire state of Israel, broad-based sanctions for several reasons. One, countries have the legal authority to. Two, the Israeli economy is interlinked with its occupation of Palestinian territory. The only way you can put real pressure on the state of Israel, and not just individuals, on the entire state of Israel, is to impose broad-based sanctions. This is not just one individual doing something wrong or 4 individuals doing something wrong. And targeted sanctions are welcome. But it is the entire state of Israel and its political and economic system which is dependent on its occupation of these Palestinian territories. Only then will there be real pressure against Israel to end its occupation, or in the least, end the starvation and genocide. And that's a bare minimum. So there's a conference going in June at New York at the General Assembly, coming up in a week or two, where the General Assembly is addressing the issue of Palestine and Israel. It's co-chaired by Saudi Arabia and France. And if they only focus on these targeted sanctions, I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Michael. We will go back again to this issue, but let's have Sümeyra Akdeniz Ordu, who is back with us now, to give her words. Sümeyra, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello.
Yeah. Hello, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Sümeyra from Germany. I'm in the participants committee from the Freedom Flotilla Coalition. And I think, as you know, my husband is still kidnapped from the Israeli soldiers. I'm waiting for any message from the foreign ministry. 4 of our friends are released now, but including my husband are waiting in given prison to the sorry, I am not the best person who can speak English, but it's the legal stuff. And I think it's also just intimidating from the Israeli soldiers that they also want to make the process longer. So not everybody could come to home back. And yes, I couldn't speak to my husband since the alarm was, you know the scenes from the camera. I was the person who had access to the camera from UFI, from the system. My husband was the person who has installed the camera in the ship Madleen. And I was recording this moment, and it was really hard to record this moment when they were kidnapped from the soldiers. Yeah, that's the introduction about me.
Thanks, Sümeyra, very much. And let's go back to our question, which was what's the comment to this long overdue decision by the UK? And by the way, this request was submitted by Arab Organization for Human Rights to the British Foreign Secretary. The first was, as I told you, 2023, and the second was just yesterday. So this resulted in direct measures against individuals. So
I can speak up.
So there, somebody's talking.
It was me, Lex Takkenberg.
Thank you, Lex. And so, Lex, you want to comment on this? I thought there's something wrong with me. You want to comment? What is your comment on this long overdue decision by the UK, and your thoughts about the next step after these sanctions?
Well, we have seen since a couple of weeks that European leaders are beginning to realize, possibly also because of those images of starving children and men and women, but also I'm convinced, as a result of 20 months of civil society action around the world, you know, Western leaders are beginning to sort of get a bit uneasy and beginning to wonder whether perhaps they were on the wrong side of history, and they should perhaps change their behavior and change their state's action. We have seen the statement of France, the UK, and Canada. We've seen Germany changing its tone, the German Prime Minister, and we have seen a range of other leaders, beginning to sort of change. In the Netherlands, taking an initiative to begin sort of use the association agreement, as many of the special rapporteurs have been recommending for the last 20 months as an instrument. So these last two sanctions, or these sanctions on these two Israeli ministers, are a manifestation of that. And this is the time for civil society to continue to sort of pressure and keep up the pressure. And the Madleen is an example. The convoys that are on their way from Tunisia and from Egypt. This is really the time to bring those leaders that are still sort of sitting on the fence and wrestling with, which side shall I support, to really sort of bring down to them that, this is no longer their position over the last 20 months is no longer sustainable, and will get them in big trouble if not in court, at least politically. So I really think we're seeing a beginning of quite a significant change, and what is important is that we sort of don't. I mean, one of the tendencies of some people in civil society is to sort of say, well, it's too little, too late. And yes, to a certain extent it is, but it is also the beginning of change, and it always starts with a trickle, and then it will raise momentum. Francesca Albanese is about to release her latest report in a matter of 1 or 2 weeks from now, and that's going to be another bombshell where she will highlight the complicity of sort of the economic actors in facilitating and continuing the genocide, whether it's the banks, whether it is pension funds, whether it is weapons industry, whether it is surveillance technology, but also where we buy our food, where we shop, the platforms we use. Today there was again news about a case in Ireland against Booking.com or Airbnb. I can't remember which of the two now. This is really the moment that collectively we can not only attack our governments, but through the tools that are available, we can also more systematically attack the private sector in all its manifestations, to stop dealing with Israel, whether it is sanctions, boycott, divestments, what essentially BDS has been advocating for years. It is now getting the critical mass to make, in a fairly short time, quite a dramatic impact.
Thank you, Lex, very much. I know we have Mr. Richard Falk and Mr. Pedro who are raising their hands, so we can just give the floor to Mr. Richard. Mr. Richard Falk. Mr. Richard, can you unmute?
I want to follow up on what Lex has just been saying. I am a little bit more skeptical about this conversion of the Western leaders. It's too early to tell whether this is just a gesture to calm down a rising civil society anxiety and pressure, or whether it really is a change of sufficient magnitude to alter the balance of political forces. I think we shouldn't be taken in by something that is a mere gesture without being having tangible impacts and intending those impacts to really change the policy. I don't find any convincing evidence that any of these governments that were former supporters of the genocide have really renounced their earlier policies. And until that happens, I think we have to continue the pressure and not be seduced by what appear to me to be mere gestures. And I want to make two other quick points. The first is that I think the time has come to reinvigorate the Uniting for Peace resolution in the General Assembly, to empower the Assembly to act in a manner that is responsive to the paralysis that has been imposed by the US veto on the Security Council. I think the United for Peace resolution, which was pushed by the Western powers, particularly the US, during the Korean War, now has a much more objective second coming that will really challenge this primacy of geopolitics that has really paralyzed the UN at this vital moment. And the final point is that in addition to the complicity that Lex brought to our attention, there is the vital focus on the US as a protector. This humanitarian foundation in Gaza has had the double effect of, for the first time explicitly, introducing an overt US presence in occupied Palestine. And it represents, in that sense, an escalation of the connection between the US and Israel. And it puts such an unreliable figure as Trump in a even stronger position to ethnically cleanse Gaza as a sequel to genocide and to serve the annexationist ambitions of the Netanyahu governing coalition. So I think we should not in any sense feel that this is some effort to really address starvation. It's an effort to again make a gesture toward responding humanistically, but the reality is a deepening of the political engagement with the Netanyahu one Israeli state solution to the Palestinian-Israel conflict.
Thanks, Richard, very much. And we move to Pedro. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, as we have said before, we are witnessing genocide against the Palestinian people, and remaining impassive is equivalent to being complicit. Has happened, in fact, to so many people who looked the other way while the Jews were exterminated by the Nazis. We need to react. The General Assembly must react forcefully, highlighting global outrage. Economic sanctions must be activated, but above all, civil society must press the governments worldwide, and I feel it is happening and will grow in the near future, I'm sure.
Thanks, Pedro, very much, and we welcome Vendetta Squadri, who had just joined us now. Vendetta is member of the European Parliament and has previously experienced the situation at the Rafah crossing firsthand. Vendetta, thank you for being with us, and now you have the floor.
Thank you so much for inviting me and for this important panel. I'm very sorry I could only join now, but I was in a series of call for institutional reasons. But I'm happy that I can actually finally join. As I said, I couldn't follow the conversation that you had and the debate that you had, but I can bring you the disappointment that we, as a member of the European Parliament, some members of the European Parliament have for the complicity that now the European Commission and the European Parliament are having towards the genocide of Palestinians. There hasn't been any condemning any word against what is actually being done. The only thing they can say that we need to solve the situation, and we all agree on that, but no one actually takes actions where we could take actions to stop the Netanyahu government. We could, and that's what we're asking for, stop the EU-Israel Association Agreement. We could sanction the ministers of the Netanyahu government and Netanyahu. We could stop having a full arms embargo on export and imports of arms and weapons on Israel, and we are not doing any of these things. We have a political, commercial, and partnering power towards Israel that we should use, and we are not using at the moment, and this makes us complicit. As you reminded, as a delegation of member of parliament and member of the European Parliament from Italy, we went to the Rafah crossing, and we saw that the current situation of the humanitarian aids, they are completely stopped in front of Rafah. The humanitarian workers, the United Nations are completely desperate for what is happening. What we are witnessing at the moment is a destruction of the humanitarian and international system and law as we knew it. And this is a precedent that puts all of us at risk, because now the Palestinians are going through a genocide and we are doing nothing to stop that. But what if it happens also to other population? We do not bear the we don't have the legitimation anymore to say anything, because we're delegitimizing this system. We are delegitimizing the humanitarian system, the humanitarian aid system that Israel now is militarized and is used as means of control to deport the Palestinian population, and is taken from the United Nations. And the United Nations is warning us that once this can be done ever, we are distracting the international and multilateral humanitarian system. This is what is happening in Gaza. So we need to fight, because the Palestinian people are going through a genocide, and we cannot allow that to happen. We need to fight for justice for these people, but we also need to fight for to maintain the law, the international law, and the multilateral system alive. We need to fight together with the United Nations. We need to fight with all the humanitarian organizations that are fighting now on the ground, and we're not doing anything about this. We have seen this situation, we've seen that in Rafah, but we also seen what has happened to the Madleen crew. The Madleen crew was stopped in international sea, in international waters, which is a complete violation of maritime law, a violation of international law. on the Madleen, in the Madleen crew, there was also a member of the European Parliament that is currently detained illegally by Israel because she didn't do anything. She was in international waters, and the only thing she actually dared to do was to try to bring humanitarian aid to a starving population. And now she's illegally detained by Israel and the Israeli government, and the European Union, the European Parliament, the President of the Parliament, the President of the Commission said nothing about this. Although there's my colleague, a member of parliament, illegally detained, they said nothing. And this is completely unacceptable. Yesterday, we sent a letter to the European Commission as member of parliament. We was signed in a few hours by more than 40 member of parliament, because that's part of the parliament that is fighting and will not accept this. A statement was released also by the S&D, the Greens, and the Left group to warn and to push the European Commission to do something to stop the violation of international law by Netanyahu. But still, Europe is doing nothing. And also a lot of our governments, including my national government, the Italian government, are absolutely complicit. The Italian government has voted against the revision of the EU-Israel Association Agreement in the European Council, and that is a sign of complicity. So the fight that we're bringing in now is to actually show to the world the complete double standard, the complete violation, the complete atrocity that the Netanyahu government Israel is doing at the moment. And we want the institutions that have the power to stop all this to finally take action. This is what we can do. We have been doing this in the institutions and outside of the institution. On Saturday in Rome, we had 300,000 people marching for Palestine. We need to keep doing this, and we need to keep pushing our government and all our institutions to do something about this.
Thank you very much, Vendetta. Now we will listen to a recorded message of Mr. Paul Murphy, member of the Irish Parliament.
Paul Murphy here. I'm a member of Parliament for People Before Profit in Ireland. What we're seeing in Gaza now is not just the use of starvation as a weapon of war by Israel to inflict ethnic cleansing and genocide on the Palestinian people. We're also actually now seeing aid, incredibly, being used as a weapon of that genocide, of that war, of that ethnic cleansing. Effectively, Israel has taken monopoly control of the distribution of any aid, has reduced it to a pathetic, entirely inadequate trickle, and is now using it to effectively pursue the program of ethnic cleansing, pushing people out of the areas they want to cleanse into particular other areas in Gaza, and then using effectively all of the people who are gathering, looking for the aid, starving because of the conditions that Israel has created, then effectively using this as an opportunity to slaughter Palestinians. Well over 600 Palestinians now being seriously injured or killed at these supposed aid distribution centres. It is utterly horrific. And we see now a vast gulf between the attitudes of ordinary people in the West and the actions of people in the West who are showing the way in terms of the Freedom Flotilla, in terms of now the march to Gaza, which I understand thousands of people are going to be participating in. That in contrast with the attitudes of governments in the West, which continue to be complicit in this genocide. This genocide is a genocide that is made in America, it is made in the European Union, it is funded, armed, supported by the major Western powers. Now we have words of some level of criticism, such is the horror and the revulsion of ordinary people in the West, but nonetheless the aid for Israel, the military support for Israel, the political support for the genocide still fundamentally continue. So our duty as ordinary people who stand in solidarity with Palestine is to try and break the siege, break the blockade of Gaza, allow the aid to get through, not to be used as a weapon of war, and to end our own government's complicity in this genocide.
Thanks very much, Paul, for this message. And now we will have the rest of our webinar today. We will have just 1 minute for each speaker just to send a message in 1 minute to the world and to the countries supporting Israel in 1 minute. And we can start with families of the onboard passengers of Madleen. In 1 minute, each one can have on this. Who can start? You can just unmute and speak. Lara?
Yes, okay. So it's hard to talk in 1 minute. I just want yes. I just want to ask everyone to keep looking at them and looking at what is happening to Palestinian people, to Gaza. And the Madleen was not only the mission was not only to bring humanitarian aid, was also to make it visible, to make the world look at it. So I just want everyone to keep looking at it, to bring them home and to press Israel to open the humanitarian aid.
Thank you, Lara. Katya, in 1 minute, we can have message to the whole world and to the countries supporting Israel.
I agree very much with Lara. It is so important that we bring them back, and once they are back, we won't stop. They probably won't stop, and so should we. So neither should we.
Thank you very much. Sümeyra?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you just want to send a message to the world and to the countries supporting Israel. What's your message?
Yeah. We saw with the Madleen that that none of the countries could help with their governments really in a really effective way. Okay, we saw maybe that every foreign ministry is trying to get their citizens back to their home, but it was a really good message for the whole world to show them, when you as governments are doing nothing, we are doing this as civil society, as a civil movement. So after this, some politicians came to me from Turkey and said, it's really embarrassing for us as politicians, and maybe it's then a really first step, this mission of the Madleen, so we can do more and more, because I think it was just a symbolic start, a step with the Madleen, and we're doing it again and again and again. It's not like that we are lose the mission, you know. Even if the Israelis came in the international water, and even if it was a violence of international law, we know the truth, and I saw that many of others are also up to this, after this mission, awake of this situation, and it's a good sign.
Thanks, Sümeyra. Clara?
I would say that the Freedom Flotilla is a really, really important first step. And I think that each and every one of us, regardless of what position in societies we have, if we are old or young, if we are politically active or not, the biggest step that each and every one of us can take is to become active. It's not too late. Go to demonstrations, sign petitions, engage in civil society organizations that are silenced to an increasing degree. because this kind of genocide that we are witnessing and the dehumanization of Palestinian people can no longer be bared. And spreading information, talking about it, discussing it, and becoming active is increasingly important, because as I said before, and as colleagues have underlined, if we don't do that, not only the Palestinians will be eradicated, but also the human rights system and international legal system will be so weakened that we are all not protected. So engage and talk about it, and pressure your governments on also weapon embargoes. And if you're an EU citizen, I think it's very important to underline quitting the bilateral agreement, such as the association agreement, for example.
Thank you very much, Clara. Lex? Yes, you can unmute.
Thank you. In line with the previous speakers, keep talking about Gaza and about Palestine. Gaza will haunt us forever, and everything should do in our power, what is in our power, to make a contribution, whether it is on social media, whether it is protesting in the street, whether it is quietly donating, whether it is having tough conversations with friends and family, whether we are educating ourselves. You know, a revolution has many layers and many different elements and contributors. So we should all keep going and be kind to ourselves and to others, and who travel together in the same direction. And, you know, especially at this ever more critical and dire time, you know, not give up, keep going.
Thank you very much, Lex. Richard?
Like others, my central message to the world, so to speak, is that the time for action is now, that we should recognize that there's a humanitarian emergency on top of a criminal enterprise that has been perpetrated on the Palestinian people for decades, culminating in apartheid and genocide and effective ecocide, and that we are all challenged to act as we can, and as we are empowered to be able to do, to put pressure on complicit governments, to urge sanctions, to re-empower the UN and international law, to take steps that promote the liberation of the Palestinian people, as well as the end of the genocidal assault that began 20 months ago.
Thank you, Richard. Michael, you have the last word.
I mean, everyone has said everything. What's at stake is not just the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and right of return, but what's also at stake is the system of global governance itself. The UN system has collapsed. It is not collapsing. It has failed. It has happened. What we have is the wreckage. What we have are the brave people of the Madleen. What we have are the brave people marching to Gaza, who are taking that wreckage in their own hands and re-empowering international law in the hands of the people. That's what we have today. And it's the cowards in government today that need to pay attention and to step up. They have the least to lose and the most power. Those that have the most to lose are doing the most they can. So people must continue whatever they can to echo, whether it's writing a letter to your politician or a hunger strike. Here at my university, here at the University of Oregon, people went on a hunger strike, whether it's demonstration, whether it's talking to your neighbors. everything counts. Everything counts as taking a position, and everyone is situated differently. So to echo what Richard and everyone has said, now is the time for action.
Thank you, Michael. And at the end of this webinar, I would like to thank all of you for being with us today, and those of you who have been able to stay at the all the webinar long and commenting and listening. Thank you very much for your precious time and input, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.